what happens is the ones that you capture, you kind of forget. The ones that you don't, they gnaw at you. They stay in your mind. You live with them forever, really. There's images that just inhabit my mind because I didn't get them. It's like lost love, you know, the lover that you lost. That's the one that haunts you, that what might have been.
Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Eyeshot 50mm. And today we're joined by Paul Trevor. Born in London, Paul began photographing in the early 1970s and became one of the most important voices of British photography, both documentary and street photography. He was the co-founder of the Exit Group, whose landmark project, Survival Program, documented lives in Britain's inner cities through photographs and recorded interviews. Across decades, Paul's work has turned again and again to the street, where the street, though, is never really just like a backdrop, but it becomes a field of relationships where bodies, glance, class, play, resistance, and urban changes emerge through the smallest invisible details. Paul, thank you so much for being with me today, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And I just want to leave a very, very small message before we start to everybody who's watching to keep liking and keep subscribing, because again, what's a very small click to you, it means the world for us. Paul is also the author of our latest limited edition book, Riffs, available for pre-order until September 30th, where he revisits his black and white archive from the 1970s and 1980s through pairs, rhythms, play, and new meanings. So I guess, Paul, we can actually start and dive immediately in the very first topic we will discuss, which is the book. And the one thing I want to say about it is that most photography books sometimes asks us to look at images one after the other, but Riffs instead begins differently, and it asks us instead what happens when two photographs share the same space and are challenging or changing each other. So the very first question I have for you is, for someone opening Riffs for the very first time, how would you describe what this book is about?
Wow. Really, this book is, the origin of it is just to challenge myself, to find a way of looking at the old stuff and looking at the archive and trying to play with the material. Now, I've done quite a few books, and they've always, the main thing about, for everybody doing books, it's all about being coherent. So you're trying to create a narrative or a sequence that makes sense to people. And the way I've done it in my projects has always been to tell a story about a place and a time. And so Riffs is about, Riffs is radically different. Riffs is about mixing up lots of different times, lots of different places, and trying to discover the thread that could hopefully link them up. So really the pairing, I started, as I said, I've got an archive that goes back many, many years. And so it's a kind of a revisit, and there was a lot of images. So just simply in order to organize the editing, just simply for that, I put two together. So already I was cutting the work down. But then at a certain point, I realized that I could make interesting or play with interesting connections. And this was fascinating. I mean, editing is the bit of photography I love the most. And so this was an opportunity to really, really play with the stuff. And I had lots of time. Nobody knew I was doing it. It was on the back burner. And actually, the first year, I started in 23, I think it was. It wasn't really working for me too well. I went back to it the next year. And then, you know, slowly, it began to, you know, just be very interesting for me to playing with it. So really, the whole approach is play. People coming to see it I hope by the time we finish the editing, Eyeshot and myself, we have a sort of narrative that is challenging, that is funny, that is rhythmic, that is questioning, that's full of surprises, that's full of anomalies or ambiguities, all kinds of things. And hopefully by the end, we will discover a thread that gives it the coherence that, all the books actually need.
Absolutely. And this is something that connects to the fact that I feel like street photography often begins before there is any subject, and there is only the act of waiting, walking, watching, waiting again, being available to what appears. And this is an aspect that is very visible in your work. When you work without a script, because you have mentioned this as well, they've always worked without a script. How do you decide? How do you orientate yourself? How do you look? How do you know those photographs from this archive as well had such an important meaning for you in the moment you shot them?
Okay, so as you said, I began in the 70s, which is like 50 years ago, and your relationship with photography changes, obviously, like any relationship.
Yeah.
Over time, it just changes. And you start off and you're full of hunger and you're full of inexperience and you're learning. The learning curve is massive. You mentioned that I work with I work with a group of other photographers. We set up a group in the
Yeah.
70s, the Exit Photography Group. Well, none of us had been to photography school. And our group was our school. So we all looked at each other's contact sheets. We learned from each other. We commented. We were very open because we needed to learn. And my attitude then was very different to my attitude now as someone who's been doing it for a long time and having built maybe like a lot of street photographers. You have to build or discover somewhere a kind of an instinct. You haven't got a script, but you are eternally optimistic. I'll tell you the main thing for me, though, of street photography is learning about loss. You know,
Exactly.
every day I see stuff that is gone. Sometimes you just can't photograph it. You just observe it, but you can't photograph it. There are many. I've actually discussed somebody doing a book of drawings of photographs that photographers never
Missed.
managed to missed. So
Yeah.
because they missed it, they describe it to an illustrator, and they would do the illustration of the image that was never captured. So in a way, you have to live with that. You realize you're going to lose a lot. But also on the other hand, life, photography, the street people, it is incredibly generous. You can have a really, really bad day and you feel like, wow, what happened? The world hates you, whatever it is, or you weren't into it. And then the very next thing, you're gifted something amazing. So you're eternally optimistic because you learn, okay, you lose a lot, but occasionally you're gifted stuff. And I think that's an attitude you've got to have.
Yes. So what have the photographs exactly that you miss taught you about the ones that you manage to make instead? Like if you would have to summarize in a sentence.
What happens is the ones that you capture, you kind of forget. The ones that you don't, they gnaw at you. They stay in your mind. You live with them forever, really. There's images that just inhabit my mind because I didn't get them. When you get the stuff, it's like, right, you got it. So yeah, it's strange. It sounds a bit perverse, but the stuff that you don't get, it's like lost love.
Yes,
The lover that you lost. That's the
absolutely.
one. That's the one that haunts you.
You will always be in love with. Yes.
Yeah, or what might have been. What might have been. So yeah, it's weird, but yeah, we have to accept the fact that we're gonna lose a lot.
And speaking of time inside the photograph, many of these photographs, of course, were made quickly in the flow of the streets, and decades later, they carry details, histories, and meanings that were not necessarily visible at the time you were taking them, as we have been saying so far. So, what can time reveal inside the photograph that the photographer might not have seen at first?
Wow, that's an amazing question, because that's one of the things that photography can do. It captures a sliver of time. And then you have the opportunity for literally, as in this case, years later, observing things that maybe you didn't notice. But the fact of, because time is, I'm fascinated by that, and I hope there's a good feeling of time flowing, and that well-known expression, the decisive moment. I'm not into the decisive moment so much, because sometimes my moments don't seem to be very decisive, or don't seem to be, I don't know, it could be of invisibility, what you don't see, whatever. But I do really feel time is, see, so there's lots of photography that I respect enormously, but somebody is static, completely static, and the challenge and the skill has been to, let's say, a portrait is to produce something remarkable, about that in that portrait. But you're kind of working with time in a very different way. Whereas on the street, everything is in flux, everything is in constant, and you as well. And the best feeling you get in photography is when you absolutely forget yourself in that flow of time. You actually forget that you're even there. You're just part of time. It doesn't happen. I think musicians get it at times when I think they call it, there's a dente or something, where they feel that they're sort of in a kind of a spiritual plane. But at times I felt, wow, I'm not even there, and those are great feelings. I'm not saying it happens every day, but when it happens, it's you kind of realize it, and afterwards, and it's kind of amazing, that you've experienced it.
Street photography, or in general, let's say some photographs are made as quick encounters again, but history can definitely, still staying on the topic of time, can change their function. So what began as a street moment can, I guess, later become evidence of how people lived, moved, gathered, or even disappeared from a location, from a place. When does a street photograph become something closer to documentary evidence, according to you?
Right, Lucrezia, these are the sort of questions.
There's too much. No, just because the sense of like...
I know. No, I think it's a really interesting area, and there are lots of people who discuss it. And, and we could have an hour conversation about that.
Sure.
No, but what I would say is that sometimes I go to, let's say let's say there's going to be a protest, and I go, and I know it's an important protest, and and maybe it's a job, and as you know, that's it's very difficult to come up with fresh imagery of protest, because it's been going on for like a few hundred years, and it doesn't seem, so, but what might happen is, on the way back, or on the way there, something very unexpected, something strange on that day, because of that event, or maybe not necessarily because of it, but you capture something, a fleeting moment or something important. And that's why photography is always, like I say, it's generous. So in order to answer your question about history, memory, identity, all those things, those are deep, those are deep subjects, and I don't dismiss it, but I just don't get into it.
Then let me move to something else, and you tell me if it's also something like that or not, because you've spoken about the 1970s as a very different place, different time for photographing public life, and the photographs in Riffs belong to this pre-digital, pre-social media era, and let's say public space, privacy, suspicion, and the presence of a camera meant something different then. What did you do in those photographs that feels perhaps harder now for a photographer?
Right. Well, first of all, I think the main burden photographers have got now is that they're in a different photo culture and it's a digital culture.
Yeah.
So in our days, we had to set up a darkroom. Nobody has to set up a darkroom now. We had to get the plumbing in. We had to get a ventilator. We had to buy chemicals. We had to mix the chemicals. We had to process the film. I can't
Yeah.
tell you how much. I can't tell you all that work. And one of the problems now for my generation of photographers is we already felt, because after we dried the negatives, we cut them, we made contact sheets. And then from the contact sheets, we used a loop, magnifying glass, and selected our images. Now, that's a massive amount of work and expense. We had to
Yeah.
buy an enlarger, a good enlarger, lens, and so we all feel we already paid our dues. And but those negatives, those contact sheets, really are outside the digital domain, and we haven't got time. Life isn't long enough to go and scan hundreds of thousands of negatives. So I've had to abandon a huge amount of my work because I literally don't have time and really don't have interest in scanning everything. How many? And actually, in the last, what is it? The last 20 years, I've been shooting digitally in color, and it's so different. It's so
Totally
easy.
different.
It's
Yeah.
so easy. So to answer your question, I think there's a burden. There's a burden that we didn't have because we weren't expected to show our stuff on Instagram the next day or the next hour,
Correct.
whatever. We always had we were, what did they call it? The slow burn. I don't know what they call it, but everything was much, much slower. And actually, even the 80s and the internet didn't really get going until the 90s.
Yeah.
So even in the 90s,
Still.
well, basically in the 90s, the infrastructure wasn't there. So you couldn't really send images via the internet because unless they were tiny, really, really small. So does that answer your question? I
It
don't know.
does.
I
It
don't know.
no, it definitely does. Absolutely. Then now moving on to something you will like even more, because the word riffs suggests play, but also play does not mean lightness. This is something I like to always try to explain. In photography, play can also be, as you also have been saying, a way of testing, disturb certainty, and discover connection that were not planned. In riffs, exactly, how do you understand the relationship between this playfulness and meaning that you want to give,
Well,
if
the
that makes
meaning,
sense?
yeah. I mean, the meaning is what we together are going to discover. That's the process of putting it all together. The
Yes,
playfulness is, the thing is, if I'm not excited, then I think it's for most photographers, you've got to be excited about what you're doing. Otherwise, you lose interest. So I've given myself, this is a very playful, it is essentially riffing. You can riff on a guitar. You can
yeah,
riff in football. You can riff in so many ways. And it's just having a go, seeing what happens. Failure is definitely permitted. And I think at the end of the process, hopefully, because you never know, you could fail. There may not be the meaning that we're all hoping that we get, but that's why
to
we do the
give.
book.
Yeah,
The book is the vehicle, is the project, is the fun we're going to have in saying, well, what does all this stuff add up to? But I think it's for me also a way of just refreshing the language a bit. Like photography is a visual language, and there's certain cliches or certain ruts that people get into with certain modes they're expected to work in. So this is shaking it all up for me, and it's kept me interested. And I'm really pleased that you're interested as well. So yeah.
absolutely. It closes up very well. Very final one, and I swear I'll let you go. I swear I let you go. Riffs, it's such an interesting concept because it really does not close the archive. It reopens it reopens it. It suggests that photograph can keep changing, not because the images change, but because we do, as we've been saying so far. After all these decades of photographing public life, what do you still do not understand about the streets?
Oh, wow. I mean, after all these years, what I realize is how great some photographers, I mean, people whose work I come across, you know, how
Yeah,
amazing, how amazing, remarkable people they were. That maybe the people like how about the Peruvian photographer, Martin Shambi,
yeah,
who had to put all his heavy kit on donkeys to go into the Andes to make these photographs, which are just astonishing. So, and he was on the road. He was he was doing street photography of that era. That's what or he would. So I mean, literally, he didn't have he was on a tripod. But so to answer really, I mean, it's just like I'm always in awe of what I see other photographers have done. I mean, how about Gardin? Is it
yeah.
Gianni Berengo
Berengo
Gardin?
Gardin. Yeah.
Wow, wow! you
What a
know,
master. Yeah,
a master.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So you realize your contribution is so is so I don't know, small compared to these greats, right? And I regard him as a great street photographer, and so on. It goes on, and there are many great ones, and so they are there in the background as great inspiration, and we're lucky. We're lucky that photography has had remarkable people willing to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely sure. Paul, I thank you so much. And I'm happy that I've got quite a lot of stuff out of you. So I know it's hard, but I thank you so, so much for being with me today. And again, for everybody who's watching, I just want to leave a very small message to keep liking and keep subscribing, because what's a very small click to you, it means a lot for us. And Paul Trevor's limited edition book, Riffs, is available for pre-order until September 30th. Paul, thank you, and talk to you soon.
Thank you. I'm glad you didn't have to see the inside of my ear. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.